The small Texas school I attended held a tradition that resonated deeply within me. Every year, during the 8th grade graduation, a beautiful gold and green jacket, our school colors, was awarded to the class valedictorian. It wasn't just any jacket, it was the scholarship jacket. A symbol of academic excellence, it bore a large, proud S on the left front and the recipient's name embroidered in shimmering gold on the pocket. My eldest sister, Rosie, had won it a few years prior, and ever since then, I dreamt of the day it would be mine. I was 14, a young woman on the cusp of high school, and I'd been a straight-A student since the 1st grade. This last year, the anticipation had been almost unbearable. The jacket represented more than just good grades, it was proof of my dedication, my hard work, and the unwavering belief in myself. My father, a farm laborer, struggled to make ends meet for our large family. Sports and extracurricular activities were luxuries we simply couldn't afford. The scholarship jacket was my only chance to shine, to be recognized for something I'd earned through sheer grit and determination. As May approached, a familiar restlessness swept through the school. Spring fever, they called it. But for me, it was something more profound. It was a mixture of excitement and anxiety, the weight of expectation pressing down on me. I found it hard to concentrate in class, my mind constantly drifting to the image of that gold and green jacket. I'd catch myself staring out the window, lost in daydreams of the graduation ceremony, the applause, the moment when the principal would call my name. I wasn't exactly what you'd call popular. In fact, I was often the target of teasing. Beanpole, they'd call me, or string bean. And they weren't wrong. I was tall and thin, with none of the curves that seemed to define the other girls. My only assets, it seemed, were my brains. A flat chest, no hips, and a brain, I'd mutter to myself, staring at my reflection in the mirror. That's all I've got. One afternoon, I was rushing back to my history class to retrieve my forgotten gym shorts. As I approached the door, I heard voices. Mr. Schmidt, my history teacher, and Mr. Boone, the math teacher, were arguing. I hesitated, my hand on the doorknob, and a wave of unease washed over me. "She doesn't deserve it," Mr. Boone was saying, his voice sharp and dismissive. "Joanne's father is on the board, you know. It would look good for the school." My heart plummeted. Joanne. She was a nice enough girl, but her grades were nowhere near mine. The scholarship jacket was supposed to be awarded based on merit, not connections. "That's not the point," Mr. Schmidt countered, his voice low but firm. "Martha has earned that jacket. She's worked harder than any other student in this school." "Hard work?" Mr. Boone scoffed. "Her kind always works hard. They have to." I gasped, a knot forming in my stomach. Her kind? What did that even mean? I felt a surge of anger, but also a deep sense of hurt. I'd always known that some people looked down on us, on my family, because we were poor. But to hear it so blatantly, to have my hard work dismissed as simply a product of my background, it stung. I wanted to burst into the room, to confront them, to defend myself. But I couldn't. I was frozen, paralyzed by a mixture of shock and shame. I grabbed my shorts and fled, tears welling up in my eyes. The next day, the principal called me to his office. I knew, with a sinking feeling, what it would be about. He looked uncomfortable, avoiding my gaze as he shuffled papers on his desk. "Martha," he began, clearing his throat. "There's been a change in policy this year regarding the scholarship jacket. As you know, it has always been free." My heart pounded in my chest. I braced myself for the worst. "This year," he continued, "the board has decided to charge $15, which still won't cover the complete cost of the jacket." $15. It might as well have been 15,000. We barely had enough money for food, let alone a luxury like a jacket. I stared at him, speechless, a small sound of dismay escaping my lips. "So, if you are unable to pay the $15 for the jacket," he said, his voice flat, "it will be given to the next one in line." I didn't need to ask who that was. I stood up, trying to maintain some semblance of dignity. "I'll speak to my grandfather about it," sir, I said, my voice trembling slightly. And let you know tomorrow. The walk home from the bus stop was a blur of tears and anger. The dirt road that led to our small house seemed longer than usual, each step a heavy reminder of the injustice I faced. When I finally reached home, my eyes were red and puffy. "Where's Grandpa?" I asked Grandma, avoiding her gaze. I didn't want her to see that I'd been crying. "He's out back, working in the bean field," she replied, her voice gentle. I went outside, the cool evening air doing little to soothe my burning cheeks. I could see him in the distance, his figure bent over the rows of tiny green bean plants, hoe in hand. He worked tirelessly, his hands calloused and worn, but his spirit unbroken. He was the strongest person I knew, my rock, my guiding light. I walked slowly towards him, the weight of my disappointment heavy on my shoulders. When I reached him, I told him everything, the words tumbling out in a rush of frustration and despair. "Grandpa," I pleaded, "the principal said the scholarship jacket isn't going to be free this year. It's going to cost $15, and I have to take the money tomorrow, or it'll be given to someone else." He straightened up, his gaze fixed on the horizon. The setting sun cast long shadows across the field, painting the scene in hues of orange and gold. He leaned on the handle of his hoe, his face etched with weariness. "What does a scholarship jacket mean, Marta?" he asked quietly, his voice barely a whisper. I answered quickly, desperately hoping he would understand. "It means I'm the valedictorian, Grandpa. It means I've earned it. I've worked so hard." He turned to me, his eyes filled with a quiet wisdom that always calmed my troubled spirit. "Then if you pay for it, Marta," he said, his voice firm, "it's not a scholarship jacket, is it? Tell your principal I will not pay the $15. I was stunned. I'd expected him to be angry, to rail against the injustice of it all. But he was calm, resolute. And in that moment, I understood. He was right. It wasn't about the money, it was about the principle. A scholarship was a reward for merit, not something to be bought. I walked back to the house, a new resolve hardening my heart. I locked myself in the bathroom, not to cry, but to gather my strength. I was still angry, but now it was a righteous anger, fueled by a deep sense of injustice. Why did they have to change the rules just when it was my turn to win the jacket? The next day, I walked into the principal's office, my head held high, my gaze steady. He looked even taller and more imposing than usual, his gaunt frame casting a long shadow across the room. "What did your grandfather say?" he asked, his voice devoid of emotion. I sat up straight in my chair, my voice clear and unwavering. "My grandfather says that if I have to pay for it, it's not a scholarship jacket." The principal's face remained impassive. He looked away, fidgeting with the papers on his desk. A long silence stretched between us, thick with tension. "Why?" he finally asked, his voice barely audible. "Your grandfather has the money. Doesn't he own a small bean farm?" I looked directly at him, forcing my eyes to stay dry. "He said that if I pay for it, it's not a scholarship jacket." He sighed heavily, running a hand through his gray hair. I could see the conflict in his eyes, the struggle between his own sense of fairness and the pressure from the board. "Martha, wait," he said, his voice softer now. I turned and looked at him, my heart pounding in my chest. What did he want now? I could feel a bitter taste rising in my throat, a mixture of fear and anticipation. He bit his lip, as if making a difficult decision. "Okay, damn it," he said finally, his voice laced with frustration. "We'll make an exception in your case. I'll tell the board. You'll get your jacket." Relief washed over me, so intense it almost made me weak. "Oh, thank you, sir," I exclaimed, my voice trembling with gratitude. Suddenly, I felt like I could conquer the world. I didn't know about adrenaline in those days, but I knew something was coursing through my veins, making me feel invincible. I wanted to yell, to jump, to run a mile. I ran out of his office, tears streaming down my face, but this time, they were tears of joy. At the end of the day, Mr. Schmidt winked at me as I passed his classroom. "I hear you're getting a scholarship jacket this year," he said, his face as innocent as a baby's. But I knew better. He'd fought for me, stood up for what was right. And for that, I would always be grateful. I finally received my scholarship jacket at the graduation ceremony. It was even more beautiful than I had imagined, the gold and green fabric shimmering under the bright lights. As I walked across the stage to accept it, I felt a surge of pride, not just in my academic achievements, but in my integrity, my courage, and the unwavering support of my grandfather. It wasn't just a jacket, it was a symbol of my journey, a reminder that even in the face of adversity, standing up for what you believe in is always worth it.